This is the Little Moments Count radio podcast, created in partnership with community radio stations throughout Minnesota. Each episode, you'll hear interviews with early childhood experts on how to support the important brain development that takes place in the first 1,000 days of life, just through little moments every day. Learn more at littlemomentscount.org/podcast.
Grand Rising, Minneapolis. This is your community storyteller, Trill Mom, and revered MC Shavunda brings the thunder here with my co-host and KRSM station manager, Andrea Pierre, the Island Care Bear, and this is our show, Power Perspectives on 98.9, where we talk about policy, art, building power, and community life in Minneapolis. This episode of Power Perspectives is presented in partnership with Little Moments Count. Little Moments Count is a statewide collaborative focused on helping parents and caregivers learn about the importance of brain development in the first 3 years of life. Nearly 80% of brain growth happens in the first 1,000 days, and small moments of interaction like talking, playing, reading, and singing help create the pathways that build a child's brain during this early stage of life. For more information, you can visit at littlemomentscount.org. So Power Perspectives is excited to be partnering with Little Moments Count to host conversations focused on early childhood development. We'll be welcoming a new guest each month to talk about their involvement in Little Moments Count and how they view the role of early childhood development in creating bright futures with strong communities. Today we have a special guest. Dr. Andrea Singh is a pediatrician, mom, chair of pediatrics at Park Nicollet, and co-leads Children's Health Initiative work at Health Partners. She enjoys working with children of all ages and their families to help them better understand their health. She teaches her patients how to be advocates for their own well-being as they enter young adulthood. She also has a special interest in helping families navigate parenthood for the first time. Welcome, Dr. Singh.
Thank you, ladies, for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. If we had a clap track, it would be clapping for you. Ashe. So we like to ground all of our guests in this question, which is, what is bringing you joy today, these days, or recently?
Children bring me joy, I have to say. And, as I was driving in this morning for Minneapolis, it's the first day of school. My kids had the first day of school last week. And my face lit up when I saw these kids standing at the bus stop, many of them with parents, and that feeling of newness and opportunity that a new school year brings for our children just makes me happy.
I love that. It's like the future. Folks get really excited about that, and that brings me joy as well, that we're putting that investment in our children and their happiness.
I've always called the first day of school the most positive day on Facebook because everyone's just posting their children and excited for the year and the new opportunities they're coming to.
Exactly. I think a lot of parents celebrate the last day of school, but in my house, when my kids were little, we would celebrate the first day of school with a special dinner, a poster when they came home, because it's the beginning. It's a chance to, if you had a bad year the year before, you're starting over. If you had a good year, it's a continuation of, good things.
Yeah, I agree. Fresh start. Sure.
So it looks like working at Health Partners, how long have you been with that agency? And just can you tell us a little bit more about your background in early childhood development that's not in your bio?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was telling you ladies before we got on the air that, ever since I was really little, kindergarten age, I knew that I loved, being around other kids. My parents are actually educators. When they came to this country from Guyana in South America, my mom switched careers and became a nurse because that was the pathway to getting, permanent residency and citizenship in the U.S. at the time. And my dad stayed in education, and he was actually a community education coordinator here in the South Side at Wilder Elementary School for a long time, and then went on to run the Minneapolis Kids Department here in Community Ed. So I grew up surrounded by the concept of lifelong learning and the fact that, there was a beautiful synergy between what my mom did as a nurse, what my dad did as a community educator. And so I feel like in some ways my path was forged for me. Like this was inevitable that I would end up there. So even as a kid, my exposure to early brain development and the importance of coming together as a village to help our kids be as successful as they possibly can was like ingrained in me. So my family lived in Southside Minneapolis for many years. And then when I got to be a teenager, we moved out to the suburbs. But I still really felt that commitment and had lots of family members that lived here. So it was very important to me. As I went through high school and entered into college, I knew my undergrad degree at the University of Minnesota was in child psychology, because that's fundamental to helping us figure out what's going on in those little kids' brains. And then I did medical school at the University of Minnesota and went off to the Bronx in New York, actually. I did my pediatric training there.
Wow. So what steps has Health Partners taken to assure that the books reflect the broad range of cultures that their children represent?
Yeah, so I have been at Park Nicollet for 19 years, and as a part of the Health Partners organization, we about 7 years ago started to integrate the books and the Reach Out and Read of Minnesota program into our well child visits. So meaning every time your kiddo comes in for a checkup or a physical, between the ages of 6 months and 5 years of age, they get a book. And we have taken really deliberate steps over time to make sure that the content of those books reflects the beauty of our communities, right? That was not always something that was top of mind for people. But as we have learned through the process, and as we have learned what we need to do to make our communities stronger and erase some of the inherent systemic racism and challenges that all people have, we have recognized that a very purposeful review of the books is important, and they need to have people of different color, different abilities, different genders. That all needs to be there so kids can see that and see that this is acceptable and really important.
Yeah, acceptable and normal,
Yeah,
and
absolutely
should be welcome. Absolutely, that there is strength in diversity, and it's very valuable. So it's important to see that and to have that.
So 80% of a child's brain architecture develops in the first 3 weeks of life. Can you just simply explain the brain science and why reading is important with the culturally appropriate books and things like that?
Absolutely. So yes, 80% of neural development in the brain happens in those first 90 days or 3 months of life. And because the brain is continuing, it's creating pathways constantly, like even before the baby is born and is in, the mother's belly, it's really important to stimulate that child. You can feel a kiddo kick, you drink a can of Coke, for example, and, you can feel like more kicking in the baby because they're feeling what is happening in your body. If you're stressed when you're pregnant, you can feel that baby kind of respond to that stress. So even in utero, reading to a baby, they can hear some of those noises. They can hear the soothing sounds. If you read, books from your community, whatever that community is, they hear those noises. They hear the cadence of your voice, which can be reassuring and calming. Once they're born, after those first days of kind of chaos at home where you're just getting used to what you're doing, and you can settle into a routine of reading to your child every day. They're hearing your voice as a loving caregiver. They're hearing the genuine compassion. And if you're reading books that represent your community, they're seeing that is a beautiful part of your life. So when those brain neurons are developing, the more they're stimulated, the more they will know. It's not like the first 90 days is like a point of no return. If you are just not there and not able to provide your child with reading every day and that constant stimulation during those 90 days, it's not a lost cause. Our kiddos' brains continue to develop and are really important. It's just that during those first 90 days, it is so critical to create those pathways. And the reading that we do doesn't have to be that. We talk about reading, but it doesn't have to be reading. It's stimulation of the baby's brain. So if you don't have books in front of you, or you don't have culturally appropriate books in front of you, that's okay. Like, just talk to your child. I tell parents when I see them for that first visit, one of the best things that you can do is to narrate your way through your day. So when you change a diaper, tell your baby what you're doing. Oh man, this was a really stinky one. Let's get you all cleaned up. I don't really know what I'm doing. I haven't changed a lot of diapers, but I'll figure it out. Because your baby is responding to the vocalizations, the noises that you make, and they are processing and learning already. The beginning, it seems like babes can't do anything, right? They just try and poop and eat and sleep, but they are learning, and we have to remember that. And we have to remember that as parents, we absolutely have the tools to help them continue to learn and grow and develop that brain.
Yeah, I've even heard that babies like cry in their particular language. So it's like absolutely true that they are hearing your voice because they're picking up what the dialect is, and they're able to like make the same sounds that you're already making in the language that you speak at home. So yeah, what are the likely benefits for children when they enter kindergarten?
So if we continue to stimulate their brain and really present them with communication and the opportunity to have a lot of, talk, sing, playing, reading in their life, there's a multitude of benefits that they'll have once they enter kindergarten in an environment that's outside of the home or the daycare that they've been in. One of them that is important is just enhancing those communication skills, right? So when they hear their caregiver, whether it's a parent or somebody else that loves them, helping them talk through things, their ability to communicate is enhanced, right? Whatever language you have, I always tell parents, use the language that you're most comfortable with. If that's your baby's going to pick up on that. Any of us, if you're not a native English speaker, they will pick up English once they go to school. Like, don't worry about that. Speak in your whatever way you're comfortable, and your child will learn for sure. By doing all of these things, reading, talk, playing, singing with your kid, you're also teaching them really important problem-solving skills for when they enter kindergarten and that school environment. When you play a game, even if it's just peekaboo or hide and seek with your child, they're learning, okay, somebody does this, and then there's a reaction. There's an action and a consequence. And if you help them learn how to deal with those actions and consequences, even if the consequences are not something they expected or something they were hoping for, how do you process that? They are going to have much more success, right? I think, sometimes people mistakenly think, well, learning doesn't start till formal learning happens when you get to kindergarten. But, we are always, as caregivers and people that are passionate about helping kids be the best people that they can be, we are always giving them tools for their toolkit. And their toolkit they carry inside of them, right? And so if we equip them with tools and skills that will help them negotiate life, we won't have some of the conflicts that we have these days with people maybe not approaching things reasonably, right?
Yeah. I think what I hear too is like it's okay to use like your oral traditions if that's part of your culture too, as long as you're just stimulating the baby with their voice and conversation and interaction. But also thinking about the long-term and health benefits from getting those 100 days, right? We have a statistic here that says 2/3 of children who cannot read proficiently by the age of 4th grade will end up in jail or on welfare. And I kind of hate statistics sometimes, but they're also very helpful. Can you just tell us more what you're experiencing in your practice when it comes to that and what you're seeing to just back up those statistics?
Yeah. So every time, and I hear that statistic probably at least once a week in my line of work and what I do, and every single time it takes me back. Like, holy cow. Like, you think of everybody just stop for a second and think of a 4th grader that right? That 4th graders are about 9 years old. So you think about that 9-year-old and the fact that a lot of times these are babies in front of us, you know, and you just want to hug them, and they want to play, you know, catch outside and play hide and seek still. And to say that if we haven't given them the support that they need academically by that 9-year-old age, they are at a higher level of risk for, you know, negative consequences and an adult life that will be more challenging. It's just sad. So yes, we absolutely see that. You know, the family unit that surrounds a child is so important in helping them figure out how to negotiate that world. And family units can be comprised of anything. You know, kids need loving adults in their life. There are, again, statistics can be deceptive, but there was a study that came out, I think, in the 90s that talked about the fact that kids that had one adult in their life that they could turn to and they felt was a trusted person were way more resilient and successful as teenagers than those people that didn't.
Yeah, I was actually talking to somebody about that same thing the other day. It's just like you just need one, at least one. You know, it takes a village, but if you at least have that one, it's going to be super helpful. And yeah, that statistic, it takes me back too. I remember it being third grade. Has it changed from third grade to fourth grade? Or
I think it's probably relative, right? It's about that age.
Well, child visits, as a pediatrician, you get to meet with young children, you know, 10 times for routine visits between the ages of birth to 5 years old. What happens during these visits?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think lots of things happen, right? Because as a pediatrician, I am moving with parents through this journey. And I feel very privileged that I get to be part of that journey with families. But it's not just the parents or whoever the caregiver is that's moving through this journey, it's the kiddo too, right? So lots of things happen during the visits. I think it's my responsibility as a pediatrician not to make decisions for parents or caregivers, but to help guide them as to what the science and, you know, research says is a good pathway to follow, right? Or how to set their child up for success. But that's going to be different in every household. But I am helping them. So during these visits, one of the important things that pediatricians can do, or anybody that a clinician, a medical professional that cares for children can do, is help parents learn how to set themselves as caregivers and their kids up for success. So, you know, at the beginning, it's just talking, I mean, honestly, the beginning, like the newborn visit, the 1 month visit, it's about survival. Like, how do I do this, especially for brand new parents? It is a stressful time. No matter how equipped you think you may be, or if this is your first child or your 10th child, it's a lot. And there's no manual that people give you. You know, you got to get your driver's license, you got to read the book and take the classes and follow the rules. When you become a parent, and sometimes you're kind of thrown in there. And so you need that trusted partner to help hold your hand. And there's no shame in that at all. You know, that is what we all need, is somebody to help you say, is this normal? Is this not normal? What should I do in this situation? Because I'm not sure. That's how we're born knowing. This is something all of us learn. And I think that is one of the reasons why those first visits are so important, is that, but you do have to find that trusted person. You know, a doctor's visit should not be awkward. A doctor's visit should not be a place where you feel you cannot speak your mind or be honest about the struggles that you are feeling. And if you are in a place where the person that you have found to take care of your child does not quite make you feel comfortable, then find somebody else. You know, absolutely. There is a right match for everybody out there. And we want to make sure that, most importantly, your child gets the things that they need. So as kids get older during those first, 10 visits and 5 years of life, and actually all the way through childhood, I try to help parents learn to advocate for themselves, advocate for their child, but I also, as time goes on, help the child learn to advocate for themselves, right? It's kind of a duo. That's why I love my job so much, because we get to do both. You know, as let's say a 2-year-old that comes into the office, 2-year-olds know a lot, and they are at an age where even though they're out of the first 90 days of life, they are picking up everything. You know that, right? They repeat, they want to do stuff. So when I put my stethoscope on a 2-year-old, I'm talking about what am I doing? I'm not just touching your body because, I want to. I'm listening to your heart. What does your heart do? Your heart's like your engine that helps body fuel up. And what do we do to help your engine run really well? We eat healthy food, we get sleep, and so helping kids learn about their bodies and their lives and their needs in a developmentally appropriate way is a lot of what I do at that age too.
It sounds like it could also serve as an opportunity for a first lesson of consent too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Touching the child's body and asking, is it okay if I touch here? If I listen, I'm going to do this. Mm-hmm. And you brought it up too about the advocacy, because that's what I was hearing. I wanted to ask you how you help parents navigate the feelings of shame or ignorance that they might be feeling when they're having these visits, and how you help them advocate for themselves so that they are in a place where they're feeling comfortable, or with someone that they feel comfortable to express themselves with.
Well, I think first and foremost, you have to acknowledge that they're having these feelings, right? And help them understand that these are normal feelings to have, and that they have the power within them to do the right thing. They might just not know what that is, but you have to meet people where they're at, and there are different parents. Like I used the example before, first parent versus parent of 10 children. They're going to be at a really different place in terms of what they need from me as a pediatrician, right? And so it's my job to make sure I adapt and help them feel comfortable where they're at and answer the different questions. Parent of 10 children, it's going to be different, because it's like, well, how do I deal with the other 9 and this 10? And 10 children get away with a lot, because
Who have you met with 10 children? Because it's that number.
I'm the youngest of 8, and I know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Let's not get away with this station break, though. We'll be back with more of our perspectives on Pearson.
And we are back with Dr. Andrea Singh, talking about child brain development and some of these visits that happen, what happened in the visits, how parents can advocate for themselves, which then turns into children learning to advocate for themselves as well. I think Andrea had a question.
Just about, we were talking about brain development in the short visits, and what are you hearing and learning from parents during these visits? And what's on our mind today? It's a very tumultuous time.
Absolutely. I think it is a tumultuous time. I think one of the things that we're hearing from parents is that there are some parents that don't understand that kids are learning right from the very beginning, or they feel worried that they don't have enough to offer their kids, so they will wait for that formal education to come. Or they're scared to use their own language because they don't want to affect, I don't want my child to have a speech delay in English because they're using their own language. So I try to help them understand that communication skills, it is a value in this country to know more than one language, right? It's a huge skill and a huge benefit. We underestimate a lot of the value that, families that speak more than one language can bring to our community. And so giving your child that leg up, think about how many thousands and tens of thousands of dollars people pay for classes later on in life to learn extra languages, and we're exposing our kids. So I help parents realize that they shouldn't feel other, right? When they bring things to their child that may not be mainstream what you see. I mean, I grew up in South Minneapolis. It's a very different place than when I grew up, where, being a child of brown skin was a little bit different than maybe some of my peers. I mean, I was still a diverse community back in the 80s, but now it's just so beautiful in different languages and different cultures that are really everywhere. which is so cool. So I think the other thing, Andrea, that I'm hearing from parents in this time where there's a lot of divisiveness is how to help teach their children to stand for their beliefs and to stand in the face of some of the conflict while not necessarily adding to the confusion, right? That's a hard thing to do, right? And we have to teach children confidence in who they are, the beauty in who they are, and acceptance. And that starts right at the beginning, right? If we just had that toddler mentality of like no judgment and we should probably share and be kind to each other and accept anyone into our little circle of play group, then we wouldn't have a lot of the problems that we do today. Our children are our future of where this world is going. So parents often will want some help on how to teach their children that. Honestly though, sometimes parents aren't ready to ask, right? They, it may feel like that's a taboo or not a conversation for the doctor's office. Or again, if they're not comfortable with who that, medical provider is, it may not be a subject that they feel okay to talk about. We are trying at Health Partners and Park Nicollet to integrate those conversations into regular visits so it becomes normal to have the conversations. Children recognize different colors and different ethnicities by 6 months of age. So we want to make sure that when we see a child sees a person that might look different from themselves, they don't have fear, that they don't have judgment, that it's just love, right? So we're trying to integrate those conversations into some of what we use as standard teaching at all of our visits.
That is so powerful. I'm just thinking about my children and their willingness to talk with anybody and walk up to anybody and hug them. And also, like as Andrea said, that we're in a tumultuous time. And so right at the ages of 5 and 6, some folks are like having the talk, as it's termed, with their children too about what's been going on in this country, especially in the recent times. So, and for me, I'm just wondering too, what encouragement do parents get in like advocating for themselves? Because there is a huge disparity with Black maternal health, and the medical field. We're talking about pediatrics, so it's just like going in as a pregnant mother, there are already things that women are faced with. What does that encouragement of the advocacy look like? And also just what does it look like for folks who are listening? How can you best advocate for yourself? What do those steps look like?
Yeah, I think all of what you just said is super important to acknowledge, right? It just because we don't talk about things doesn't make it real. And so that's where I think us having these conversations is a really important first step, right? So I feel like I'm going to go back to pediatrics and say part of my job as a person that cares for children in the medical field is to help kids from a young age learn to trust medicine. Okay. Right? Because when we go back to the maternal, Black maternal mortality rates and disparities that exist, people have not been treated well, right? Those are real numbers, real statistics. And as a result of that mistreatment, women have learned not to trust the medical community. And that also contributes to the problems, because if you're not accessing the medical community when you have health problems, they're going to get worse, right? So as a pediatrician, part of what I try to do is help teach children that the medical office is a safe place, that you can come to me. So if I teach a little girl that when she is a kiddo, then I hope when her turn comes to be a mother, that she will remember what we've learned in the office as a young one and say, okay, I know there's these statistics. I know this is real. I'm not going to ignore it and pretend that because I had a nice pediatrician, like life is going to be different. But I'm also going to know there are good people in the medical world that accept me for who I am, accept and acknowledge the risks that I have, for instance, as a Black woman, that will help me. And that little girl, that little Black girl, has the confidence to access what she needs and to speak her mind. And when she said, this is not going well, I'm feeling ignored, I'm feeling like I'm being gaslit, that she can either seek help from somebody else or she can say to that person, look, I need this. My body needs this. My mind and my soul need this. And hopefully, she will know that there are at least some people that are listening and working to make it better. I think as a parent or a caregiver or any individual, frankly, because we all have to seek medical care at some point in time, you have to be able to advocate for yourself and know. The nice thing is we live in a place here in the Twin Cities where there are great medical professionals. There are people, medical community in general. Obviously, there are exceptions to every rule. In general, the medical community is really working toward trying to reduce systemic racism, trying to reduce these disparities. I mean, it's been really cool to see the collaboration that has happened even across like different companies and stuff. Little Woman's Count is a wonderful example of the collaboration that has happened between different medical providers and different medical organizations to say, look, we have a common goal. We have the common goal of bettering the lives of women and children in our state. And we know and we acknowledge that Black women have not been a part of that better health conversation, and that they have struggled with significant disparities of our doing. So let's fix that. We can't fix it overnight, but we can acknowledge and try to make the steps toward helping. The other part of the conversation that has been really important is figuring out how trauma and adverse childhood events affect health and what we consider general medical health in general. And the medical community over the last 5 years has really come to learn a lot about the fact that stress even, and historical trauma will affect the health and well-being of adults right now, but even your children and your children's children. Yeah. So part of health is addressing social determinants of health, trauma, stress, and doing our best to help families acknowledge that those things are going on and how can we maybe help make the right connections to ease some of that burden as well.
I'm really glad you brought that up. Over the weekend, I watched a documentary called Katrina Babies, and it was about the children that were affected by Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans and them going into adulthood and how it has affected their mental health and how they're all like having consistent trauma responses to different things because New Orleans hasn't recovered necessarily from it either. And it really kind of ties into what you were saying even at the beginning of the show about the importance of family and having those people that care about you around, because a lot of people lost that. They've been displaced and haven't been able to move back into those neighborhoods, can't afford it now because of gentrification and other situations that have happened. And I'm just even thinking about our children here in Minneapolis after watching the uprising, after seeing someone get killed, splashed all over the news, seeing, tankers and things like that, wondering about the mental health of our children here in the Twin Cities Metro who have just gone through something really big on top of COVID.
Absolutely. Actually, we all remember where we were and what we were doing when George Floyd was murdered, when it all, when we learned about it, and then when you watched the riots, right? That was my first and foremost, and honestly, for me, it was very pertinent because I could see my grandma's apartment building from, Lake Street, right? So, I had a very personal reaction to that. I remember my school bus like driving down that street when I was 6 years old, and the first thing I thought is, all these kids, how is this going to affect, their perception of life in general, regardless of, their role, just everything. Life is scary, life is scary, and it became scarier for kids when they were exposed to something. It's not to say we shouldn't expose them to what's actually happening. We have to have the talk with the kids. We have to let them know, but it does impact you. And honestly, it impacts you, not only your mental health, your physical health, but it actually impacts your genetics and the health of future generations. We know that. There's a whole field called epigenetics that talks about the fact that trauma right now that you experience alters potentially your genetics and can affect the health of future generations. It's a big deal. And we can't shy away from the fact that there are some children that need mental health support, that need extra things. I know sometimes it's taboo, like, okay, we can just do this. Like, our family can take care of this, and these kids, they're fine. And sometimes there are kids that need more.
So what do you do, like, if you do have a younger child that you think may need some mental health support, and how do you talk to them about it? And get them started on the process towards getting the help that they need?
That's a good question. The same way you get them help for anything else that they need. So, because mental health should not be like a different health condition. I try to help families realize that it is not a failure if your child needs a little extra help, right? Just like it wouldn't be a failure if your child needed extra help with reading at school, or it wouldn't be a failure if your child had asthma and needed an inhaler before gym class. Like, mental health is health. And so the way to get started is to talk to your child about feelings, right? It is normal to have feelings. And part of it is, it's tricky a little bit, Andrea, because I think you have to be very developmentally appropriate with kids. If it's a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, like your son, I talk with them about having big feelings. And big feelings are okay to have. Sometimes big feelings can be really exciting and happy, like when it's your birthday and you're having cupcakes. And sometimes big feelings can be sad or scary. Like maybe there's a big thunderstorm or something else is happening. And so, having conversations about feelings is really important. Getting help as a parent. So like, if you're not sure how to have those conversations, bring the child to their healthcare professional. Or bring them to their school counselor. They are trained to do that too. And see what resources they have, because we want to help these kids. And we know, again, I love to use the analogy of tools in a toolkit. If we help these kids get a little bit of counseling or a little bit of help, we are giving them tools in their toolkit to handle stress that they will have with them forever.
And it's a huge benefit too. It's not even like this will be good, but it's necessary, because it most definitely will impact what their future looks like and their success will look like in the future. I think we are due for another break, and so we will be back. Stay tuned to Power Perspectives. And we are back with our Little Moments Count collaboration with Power Perspectives, speaking with Dr. Andrea Singh, talking about a lot of really important topics, just getting off of the topic about trauma and how that affects the brain, the body, the genetics. And yeah, it's put a lot on my mind, and just remembering the reading and how important that is, the talking, the singing, the interaction, the communication, and communicating to our children when we are experiencing traumatic events as a community and personally as well, how important that is. So just moving forward, and wanted to touch on COVID and vaccinations for children as we're going back to school and they're back in those classrooms. I'm seeing some folks walk in with masks, some not. What is the latest information on vaccines and how can people sign up?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a couple different things. One is, it was the end of June this year when our kids 6 months to 5 years were finally eligible for COVID vaccine. And that is a really important thing to acknowledge, because that group of individuals has been very slow on the uptake of getting the vaccine. Now we're back in school. I had a lot of parents tell me, well, I'm not going to do it in the summer because it's too new and I got to wait for the kids to get back in school. Well, here we are. We're in September. So if you haven't gotten your child vaccinated, I would highly encourage you to schedule that appointment. There are 2 kinds of vaccines that are available for kids between the ages of 6 months and 5 years, and actually all kids now. Both Moderna and Pfizer vaccine are available for COVID for that age group. And the Moderna vaccine is 2 doses for that age group, 6 months to 5 years, 6 months to 6 years for Moderna. 2 vaccines spaced 1 month apart. So you got to get the first one, but you're not fully vaccinated, so you get that second one a month later. Pfizer vaccine is a smaller dose, but it's separated into 3 shots over a 3-month period. So you get your first one, 3 weeks later you get a second one, and 2 months after the second one you get a third one. So if you think about it, it's beginning of September now. If you choose to do the Pfizer vaccine, you're going to be fully vaccinated by the beginning of December. Some families are choosing that option because they want the smaller dose. They want to kind of go low and slow. And either one, they're good vaccines. Both of them are excellent vaccines that are safe for kids. Now, lots of children across our country have gotten them. It is important to acknowledge that with the COVID vaccines, the vaccines themselves don't necessarily prevent your child from getting COVID. But what they have been successful in doing is preventing the dangerous complications, the hospitalization, getting really sick. I think some people think because you can still get COVID even if you're vaccinated, like, oh, it's not worth it, right? Dude, but who wants their little one to end up in the hospital having trouble breathing or having trouble taking in, fluids or anything because of COVID? We don't know what the long-term consequences of 1 COVID infection, 2 COVID infections, 3 COVID infections are going to be on our child's overall health. People are worried. I've had individuals express fear to me about the consequence of the vaccine, but you can't forget the consequences of the disease are also very unknown and unstudied. The vaccine at least has had some studies done with it and some specific safety studies. The disease itself, we don't know. I mean, we know about all these adults that are having all COVID symptoms.
So usually neurological.
Yeah, you got to imagine that some of this over time will play out in the kids' brain development and things as well. And that's scary for me, So I encourage families have to make the decision that they feel is right for them. But, when they ask me about safety, efficacy, I say, my children have gotten the vaccine. I would never tell you to do anything that I wouldn't do for my own kids from a safety perspective. And I do recommend them.
At this point, there are not a lot of people who I know of who haven't gotten COVID yet. So what does it look like once you've already gotten COVID in relationship with the vaccine?
Really good question, because I think there is a misperception that, I had COVID, so I don't need the vaccine anymore. But natural immunity varies from person to person. Some people, it can be very short. Other people, they get a little bit of longer protection. But in general, the science tells us it's probably about no more than 60 to 90 days of natural immunity. And now we all have kind of become scientists, right, and learning about COVID. And we've heard this thing about like mutations and different variants and all of that kind of stuff. Honestly, as the disease itself changes, our natural immunity doesn't protect us as well anymore. So, that was why a whole bunch of people that had COVID once with the Delta variant got sick again this past January when Omicron showed up, right? It's because it's a little bit different. So it tricks your immune system into, thinking it's new. Even though it's the same disease, it's just a little bit different. So it actually is really valuable to get the vaccine, even if you have had COVID previously.
So if you have a child that has already been vaccinated, fully vaxxed, when should they get a booster shot? Are you recommending that, or is it only certain populations of youth that should get it at this time?
Yeah, good question. It is certain ages and certain intervals since your last vaccine. So, this new booster shot was just approved last week, but it's been approved for, I think, 12 and above. So if your child is fully vaxxed as of 2 weeks ago, you probably should be checking your card to see like when was the last previous vaccination. And if it was more than 5 months ago when your child's over 12, then you may want to be contacting your clinic or pharmacy to see if you can get in. The other little plug I would put in there is we're now in flu shot season time. So it is perfectly acceptable to get a COVID booster and a flu shot at the same time. And we're actually encouraging people to do that to stay healthy this winter.
As we move on into our segment about well-being, community care, self-care, we have a word from our Lord, Audrey, that is, which is caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. With that, I want to ask you, what are your rituals for self-care and well-being, and also community care, for parents? What advice do you have?
Yeah. I tell parents all the time that you can't show up as your best self for your kids if your tank is empty. Mm-hmm. And it's hard because 99% of the parents that I interact with love their children, and their children, they would do anything for their children. And they just want to set their children up for success. And sometimes that feels like I have to give all of me all the time. But when you give all of yourself, you're not leaving anything in the reserves. And remember that as a caregiver, your children are modeling what you do into their lives. So if your child sees you taking care of yourself, eating healthy, taking breaks when you need to, getting the mental health supports that you need, then they are getting enough sleep, then they are going to think that that's normal. And they're going to incorporate that into their lives as they have more agency to do so as a young adult, etc. So I
obviously my small kids do too. Yeah. Take a deep breath. I need my own space.
Absolutely. I try to teach kids that. We talk sometimes in appointments about how are you, getting along with your sibling and what happens when you and your sibling fight. And it's okay to tell them you need space in a nice way. That I need a little bit of alone time, but I'll play with you, little brother, when I have my alone time, instead of slamming the door in their face or like telling them they're stupid and hitting them, but it's all about your approach. And ultimately, I believe that many, many things come down to communication and how you communicate your needs. So I tell parents, it is okay to take a break. It is okay to find help. You don't have to do everything. If you're a single parent, you don't have to do it all by yourself. It feels like you do. But there are people in our community that are willing to help. Or, if you don't have that person, reach out to your medical professional or your kid's school and find out what resources there might be to give that little bit of support and lift that you need to be that parent that you want to be for your child.
Awesome. Now, what do you do?
Yeah.
I gotta ask that.
Yeah, great question. So I learned, and this is something it's not something that comes naturally, right? You, as a giving person, you want to give all the time. So one thing that I do is I try to exercise. I tried. I get enough sleep is really important to me. So I try to get enough sleep every night. I spend time with my friends. It is okay to have adult time. That adult time that is responsible and, but the kids are okay, as long as they're in good hands with whomever they're with. My kids are big now, so they can be on their own, but when they were little, it's okay to go out, for a little bit and then take a little bit of a break. You have to fill your bucket up. I've also learned, and this is a hard one, I think, for some people, I've learned to say no to things. You don't have to be everything to everybody because then you're nothing to yourself. And so you have to learn to balance that fill yourself up, fill your kids' bucket up, and then, whatever else is important to you. To me, it's, being part of the community and giving back in that way. And so I found things that I feel passionate about that I can that can help me fill up my bucket.
Absolutely. Now, because this show is Power Perspectives, we like to ask our guests as well what their definition of power is.
I think my definition of power would be self-advocacy and knowing who you are as a person and what you can bring, what good you can bring to the world. Because every single person out there has something they good. Not I want to make sure that disclaimer is in there. Something positive that they can bring to the world. It'll be different for different people. Not everybody has the same skill. Not everybody has the same ability. There is absolutely something good that you can bring, and that is power to me. It's being able to recognize what is inside of you and how to cultivate that to improve other people's lives.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. And with that, we just want to thank you so much for joining us today for this show. It's been really just I would say not necessarily eye-opening, but just really great reminders of practices that we have to have and things that we can do with our children without overcomplicating things. It can be so simple sometimes, and just the reminder too of how we have to best take care of ourselves and give something for ourselves, save something for ourselves if necessary. So thank you so much, Dr. Singh, for joining us for Power Perspectives and our Global Count episode. We give thanks, Andrea.
No, just really thank you, Dr. Singh. It's been a really great conversation. And just thank you for all that you do for community and being out there supporting the babies. Like, we need that. So thank you.
Absolutely. So y'all, be well. Drink green. Get sun. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the Little Moments Count radio podcast in partnership with community radio stations throughout Minnesota. You can find the Little Moments Count radio podcast wherever you get your podcasts and at littlemomentscount.org/podcast.